a 14-inch blade that he regularly kept on his person. He referred to it as his sword. He then proceeded to stab Kenneth 7 times, twice in the front of his body, in his stomach and chest, and then 5 times in his back. Mr. Collins then went back into Kenneth's car and sat for 5 minutes in the parking lot while Kenneth lay dying. 5 minutes. After those 5 minutes, Mr. Collins exited the car, went back to where Mr. Bugbee lay, and proceeded to drag him across the parking lot of that elementary school.
We just heard from the state's attorney who is asking the parole board, they're saying, please, for the sake of the victim, keep this man locked up, let him serve the remainder of his sentence. Now, the only reason that he is up for parole is because of Act 23169, which out of the state of Connecticut, it was a special act that said if you were under the age of 21 when you committed your crime, no matter how horrendous, you would have a chance at parole. And you heard me correctly, not the age of 18, like in most states, but actually the age of 21. They are saying under 21, you're just a child. Now, this man, who was a man when he committed this crime, when he murdered a 44-year-old in cold blood, as a matter of fact, they still don't know why he committed the vicious murder. Now, to his credit, he has seemed to accomplish quite a lot while in prison. He does stick out of the crowd for most hearings that we see. So should that be enough to be released early? Should they re-victimize the victims because of his, well, I guess, success in prison? Well, you can watch this hearing and let me know your thoughts. Now, he gives an opening statement that is long, one of the longer opening statements probably that we've ever seen. So if you want to skip ahead to the 33-minute mark, you can. And with that, let's jump in.
So as previously stated, this is a public Act 23169 hearing. It's being conducted in consideration of a parole application for Terry Collins, inmate number 203-02661. Mr. Collins is serving a sentence of 25 years flat with no probation to follow for murder. There is victim input in this case. There is also an offender accountability plan. It has been reviewed and shows that he has completed the following programs, which includes alternatives to violence, both basic and advanced, people empowering people, voices, as well as domestic violence. He's currently enrolled in the College Pell Grant Program and maintains a job assignment. Utilizing the statewide collaborative offender risk evaluation system, the offender's overall score in the RT falls within the low range risk for recidivism. Mr. Collins, this is now your opportunity to express to the board why you believe you should be granted parole, and you may begin.
To the members of this board, those whom these proceedings concerned and impact, and all of today's viewers, good morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging why we've all arrived to this moment. While it's true that today is an opportunity for me, I acknowledge that ultimately it has also come at the cost of Mr. Kenneth Bugbee's life. So as it's always important for me to do, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend a genuine apology to Mr. Bugbee and his family for my actions which caused his death and everyone else impacted by his loss. We're here today to reconcile with my actions during my youth, my actions during my incarceration, and as a result, answering the question of where we go from here. Now, of course, the task of contextualizing my life up to and beyond the day of Mr. Bugbee's death will be difficult. So too is the difficult task of every person involved with today's proceedings, being assured that 1, I am remorseful for my actions during my youth, and 2, that ultimately I've matured into a responsible adult that is suitable for society today. So while I acknowledge that the task before us will be difficult, I am thankful for today's opportunity. I'm thankful because it allows the illustration and witnessing of my accountability, my remorse, and how I've grown. Now, during my maturation, I've learned to believe that essentially people are good because they commit themselves to doing good, despite the fact that sometimes they can and will fall short of goodness. Eminent psychologist and Holocaust survivor Dr. Edith Edgar would agree, since she urges people to declare, yes, I made a mistake. It doesn't make me a bad person. My doing is not the entirety of my being. I am good. The essence of what Dr. Egger urges is that while it is important to confirm our negative actions, it's equally necessary to affirm that we are not our negative actions, actually that we can and must transcend them. Well, I agree with what she urges because my experience during my incarceration confirms it. So ultimately, although I committed a rash act as an 18-year-old teenager, as a 39-year-old adult, I know that I'm prepared to be released back into society once again because I continue to demonstrate a commitment to meaningful care and consideration for others. Now, while this is the responsible person that I am today, I also recognize that it's been a process, and it's this process that I would like to share with you all moving forward. To explain my history before my crime, the most necessary place to begin is my childhood. As far back as I can remember, the unhealthy relationship that I had with my father, Mr. Terry Collins, and the unhealthy relationship that I witnessed between he and my mother, Mrs. Deborah Smith, is when my path of rash and compulsive behavior began. Now, early on, my father exposing me to his negative behavior impressed on me that such behavior equated to being rewarded. And really, this impression would stick with me until my father went to prison in 1991 and far beyond. In addition to the way that I internalized my father's incarceration was the domestic violence that I experienced at the hands of my mother's subsequent husband, Dennis Thomas. I witnessed him beat my mother, and then he would attack my brothers and me when we tried to come to our mother's defense. And despite the fact that we pleaded with her to put him out, she always took him back. Consequently, I developed a self-disdain because I didn't believe my mother loved me when allowing this person to continue living in our home. I also developed a resentment towards my mother because of this relationship. As a result of how I would internalize these traumas, I began to act out early on in my childhood. Now, during this time, the way my internalization of these traumas were addressed was by trying to correct my actions rather than on understanding the possible causes for my hopelessness and despair. Little attention was paid to my accomplishments and aspirations, or who I cared for, loved, or hated, what motivated and engaged me, what kept me stuck, or even what gave me peace. Such an address only exacerbated the difficulty of my childhood, and worse, it characterized me as a difficult child. At this point, I encourage you all to consider that the trauma I experienced at home became so overwhelming that it interfered with my undeveloped ability to focus in school, going as far back as kindergarten. Also, my opposition to school had much to do with my inability to establish healthy relationships with other children while I was in school. Because after all, I learned at home that relationships were constructed on control and violence. And what I learned at home, I exercised at school and on the playground. Now, while it's true that I had a hard time making friends, it doesn't mean that I didn't make any at all. Besides my younger brother, Christian, the first meaningful friendship that I had on my own was when I met a kid in a juvenile detention center when I was 13 years old. His name was Jason, and he was a 17-year-old foster child from Brooklyn, New York. Jason took me under his wing while we were in the juvenile detention center, and he was someone who accepted me for who I was. And we would remain friends until, unfortunately, in 2002, he was murdered. Now, going in and out of juvenile detention between 1998 and 2002, eventually I was released shortly before my 17th birthday, and it was then that I moved to Connecticut. Now, at this point in my life, things really started to spin out of control. From my dysfunctional relationship with my father, my mother, and my then girlfriend, as well as the loss of our unborn child and the loss of both of my paternal grandparents 1 week apart. And finally, there's my extreme alcohol abuse that began when I was 12 years old. These traumas were the lead up to the night of my crime, the 49th day after my 18th birthday. Now, at this time, I didn't think about how my crime would impact my family or anyone else for that matter, since I was ill-equipped to think beyond the next day, and I virtually couldn't see that far. My susceptibility to the constant fear of all the violence I witnessed around me had a lot to do with my unhealthy choices. from my friend being violently killed, to the widespread use and selling of drugs in my neighborhood. Also, my desire to be like my father, who during my youth clearly set an unhealthy example of what it is to be a man. And then there was my experience of being placed in handcuffs at 12 years old, and my experience in the juvenile detention centers, where I was oftentimes coerced by staff members to fight other children who were deemed aggressive. It was also in these same detention centers that I witnessed sexual abuse on the most vulnerable children amongst us. As a result, I developed a desensitization of how I oriented myself to myself and the rest of the world. It's been deeply emotional coming to understand that for a long time, I was not equipped to meaningfully realize or appreciate that what I was doing was wrong, but not for the sake of refusing to. It was because I was a rash child and teenager who did not have nor fully understand the sensibility needed to appreciate the impact of my actions. And despite the fact that I was given several chances to learn my lesson, as a preteen and teenager struggling to reconcile with my actions and my traumas, learning my lesson became less of a priority, if at all. What I've learned about my life then is this: the only reason that I was actively destroying anything good in my life is because I hated who I was. But that's not the case today. And with that being said, by no means do I offer these realities of my life experiences as a justification or excuse for my actions during my youth, but only to give you a more complete picture of who I was and why I made some of the unhealthy choices that I did. At this time, I'd like to address whether I believe in the fairness of my sentence for my crime. On the one hand, given what society did not emphasize about the development of a young person's brain in 2003, I can understand how one might consider that my sentence was fair. But because there is an emphasis on it today, without being presumptuous, I think that we all can agree that my sentence could be fairly reconsidered. But I do appreciate the difficulty of even trying to reconcile with the idea of fairness, because I can imagine that for Mr. Bugby's family, they could care less on whether I believe if my sentence was fair or not. I mean, he's gone because of something that I did, and I'm pretty sure they think that's not fair. So while fairness is important to me, what is more important is the remorse that I have for everyone impacted by my actions during my youth. I didn't know Mr. Bugby well, but I can imagine that he suffered the night of my crime. And honestly, I think about him sometimes. Most recently, I thought about him during my college graduation as I had the opportunity to spend time with my family. And it was bittersweet because as had to spend that time with my family, I was thinking about how many similar occasions has he missed out on because of what I did? Or how many similar occasions has his family missed out on with him because of what I did? Considering I've had an impact on his family, I feel disappointed, awful, and embarrassed to say the least. But during my maturation, I have thought and continue to think about what they go through. I think about them in their different stages of grief, possibly blaming themselves, maybe even thinking that he would still be alive if they did more. And I empathize with these thoughts because I know what it is to lose a loved one to a violent act and then blame myself. But the fact of the matter is that they are not responsible for the actions that caused his death. I am. And so I do think about them and I empathize with them. More than anything, I hope Mr. Bugby's family will one day get to a place of healing. And not for the sake of forgiving me, but for the sake of having some meaningful peace in their lives. I also hope they see that my heart's changed because of the scar I've placed on theirs. And as I think about Mr. Bugby's family, I'm reminded about the children of the Mary R. Fisher Elementary School and how they had to internalize the trauma of knowing that somebody died on their school grounds. I'm also reminded about how my own negative actions impacted my own family. What I know about my criminal act that took all but 15 minutes is that it's had a lasting effect on a lot of people. Before my sentencing, I'll always remember Mr. Bugby's mother stating that two families lost someone. She lost her son, and my family lost me. And her words then could not have been truer. That's why today, I make amends by remaining dedicated to transforming the great pain that I caused into a greater purpose. And because my remorse as an action begins with my attitude, it's my sincerest hope that everyone impacted by my actions as a youth can see that my actions as an adult reflect my new attitude. And these are some of the reasons why emphasizing remorse is of great importance to me. And my institutional history reflects my remorse in action, which I would now like to take the time to highlight. I've taken DOC programs such as anger management, people empowering people, and domestic violence, as well as non-DOC correspondence courses such as the Stratford Career Institute, where I graduated as a certified healthcare aide. The program I'm currently in now is the Wesleyan Center for Prison Education Program, or CPE, and actually was through this program that I was able to earn and receive my associate's degree in general studies, graduating cum laude from Middlesex Community College. I'm also on track to graduate with a bachelor's degree in African American Studies from Wesleyan University in the fall of 2026. It's important to note that this college attainment represents a transformative experience of personal growth. And the upshot of all this is that I remain dedicated to programs today because I believe in what they offer me for tomorrow. Engaging in all of these programs, what I've learned is that my worst experiences can be my best teacher, catalyzing unforeseen discoveries and opening me up to new possibilities and perspectives. And these lessons are important because they will prevent me from reoffending. But of all the programs that I've taken, the one that I've benefited the most from is without doubt domestic violence. The program helped me understand how my own experience as a victim of domestic violence influenced my rash behavior as a youth. And so I'm committed to helping victims become survivors, equally as important so that they don't become perpetuators. The program also helped me recognize the seriousness of how domestic violence is socially undermined when it's only portrayed in a physical abuse context. Therefore, I'm determined to emphasize the need to pay attention to other forms of domestic violence, like verbal abuse, psychological abuse, and financial abuse, just to name a few, so that we could prevent the worst case scenarios from happening. The program also inspired me to acknowledge that because women are the most vulnerable to domestic violence, that it's incumbent upon me to use my male privilege as a means to be an ally for women's liberation from domestic violence. Essentially, I'm inspired to be for other victims of domestic violence what for a long time nobody was for my mother and me during our experience. I'm also inspired to be an example for my nieces and nephews. And finally, I'm inspired to teach both boys and men that a meaningful and healthy relationship with their intimate partner is demonstrated in a collaborative effort with them and never at the expense of them. And so this is why domestic violence is the program that I've benefited the most from. Equally important as the programs I've taken is my work history. I've had steady employment since 2008, and at present, I work as a unit maintenance worker cleaning showers. Actually, I chose this particular assignment because I believe that despite the fact it's considered a menial job, it offers me the opportunity to exercise humbleness as a work ethic. In fact, my work reports speak to this work ethic. And ultimately, my work history suggests that I am more than capable of maintaining and getting a job when I get home. My program and work history have much to do with my disciplinary record. Over the last 21 and a half years of my incarceration, I've worked hard to change the unhealthy things about me that ultimately put me in prison in the first place. And admittedly, that change didn't happen overnight, as I received several tickets within the first 3 years of my incarceration. However, I've not received a ticket since March 18th, 2006. And one reason is because on March 23rd, I was informed by my younger brother, Christian, that he was having a daughter. And even though I was already an uncle, this child just inspired something different in me. And honestly, I just wanted to be someone different for that little girl. Well, the little girl who inspired me then is the young lady who inspires me today. And her name is Liliana. 6 months after I found out about her, I earned my GED. And a full circle moment recently happened where Liliana and I both earned our associate's degree 1 week apart. And I can say that it's really one of the proudest moments that I've ever had in my life. Also, my early transition has much to do with my Islamic faith because it inspired me to challenge my old ways of thinking and living and to realize that these ways are not sustainable. And finally, during my early transition, I had the assistance of 2 retired DOC clinicians, Mrs. Roxanne Darby and Miss Angela Washington. They were pivotal in helping me heal because they focused less on trying to correct my behaviors and more on what drove those behaviors. And in the end, they helped me understand how I was hurting myself and others, but equally as important, how I can begin to get on my road to making amends for that hurt. So while my ticket history makes it seem that I matured overnight, I promise that it's been a process catalyzed by the birth of my niece, religion, and therapy. My maturation and disciplinary record reflects that for most of my incarceration, I have been and remain an exemplary incarcerated person. Now, on November 16, 2022, I appreciated the opportunity of being able to talk about my maturation during my commutation hearing. And that hearing, similar to this one, doesn't represent me taking another bite at the apple, but it represents me presenting who I am with the confidence of knowing that not only am I prepared to be released back into society, but that I'm ready to be a contributing factor to society. Ultimately, the hearing went well from my perspective. And admittedly, I was frustrated when I wasn't released because my mother just suffered a heart attack and I couldn't be there to help her. But I saw even this as an opportunity to either focus on my frustration or my freedom. I chose my freedom then, and I choose it today, because the worst prison is actually not the one that I've been in the last 21 and a half years. It's the one that I once built for myself as a youth that ultimately cost Mr. Bugby his life. In the end, my hearing was important to me because it highlighted that I was doing things the right way, even when they didn't go my way. I would now like to describe my reoffending challenges and my reentry plans for the future as they relate to my freedom. As for my reoffending challenges, I know the hardest thing I will have to do is transition from prison to society. But I know the healthiest way for me to work through such a challenge will be to seek therapy. Another challenge will be, while healing from my prison traumas, also being in relationships, both intimate and non-intimate. And since I come with different types of trauma, it's important to have relationships that value being informed of what those traumas can look like so that we can create a safe space for each other. Also, there's my childhood history with alcohol abuse. Now, alcohol is the substance of choice that I've struggled with the most, and I acknowledge that I was a youth who heavily abused alcohol. But I've never been an alcoholic adult, and I'm proud to say that I've now been sober since March 23rd, 2006. That's 19 years and 8 months tomorrow. This is longer than any amount of time that I actually spent drinking. In fact, it surpasses the amount of time that I came into prison as a youth. This is a result of being aware of my triggers. And that's why if I were granted parole and required to go to treatment, I would do so. And actually, this is why I attend AA meetings when I can. Now, given my sober time, although I don't consider myself high risk anymore, I still operate like I am. And as a result, this operation has contributed to the success of my sobriety. Also, I've reached out to mentors at the C-Card Center on Chapel Street in New Haven so that I can establish an expanded network of people who can help me maintain the success of my sobriety once I transition back home. And because I do have 2 sponsors who do not use substances and will hold me accountable for maintaining my sobriety, the risk of me relapsing is non-existent, as it's been demonstrated over the 19 plus years of my sobriety. So while I do have a sense of what my challenges are, I have a greater sense of knowing that I can be successful whenever I encounter them. Now, if I'm granted parole today, my short-term goals are to live with my mother in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment located in West Haven, Connecticut. Next, after being trained, I will work virtually in the billings department of my aunt and cousin's company called Lifespan. And this is a company that equips families to care for their loved ones living with autism. The Wesleyan CPE program is also dedicated to helping me get registered as a Wesleyan student in the fall of 2025 if I'm released this year. I also intend to reconnect with my mentors, a Mr. Mark Aldridge, a retired DOC employee, and Mrs. Beth Young, a writing contributor to the local Newtown newspaper. I met them when I was in a playwriting program at Gardner CI, and they now run a nonprofit organization called Theater Arts and Opportunities that help at-risk youth in Bridgeport. I will assist them in helping these youths become playwrights and tap into their own creativity, and hopefully offer them another means for trying to reconcile with their own traumas. My long-term goals are to eventually get my own apartment, and after getting my bachelor's degree, I will explore different resources for financial aid so that I can go back to school for my master's degree in social work. Eventually, I intend to become either a social worker and/or a trauma therapist, since I desire to help families heal from being impacted by the intersection of domestic violence and mass incarceration. And finally, during the process of the aforementioned long-term goals, if I'm suited for the opportunity when it arises, then I look forward to becoming someone's husband and perhaps someone's father. Now, of course, these goals are contingent on my going home. And going home for me looks like the actualization of being able to love my family and friends without any more restrictions. Also, to exercise my full autonomy as a responsible adult. And finally, to see my dreams and aspirations encounter their fullest potentials and opportunities. This is what going home looks like for me. And even though it's true that 21 and a half years is a long time to be incarcerated and that a lot has changed, still, my goals for my future rest on the principles that I have today, which can and have proven to always transcend both time and change. So I'm assured that I can and will use the tools that it takes to address any reoffending challenges, and that I will follow through on my reentry plans for the future. Now, what will help me be successful is the support networks that I have. Although I'm not originally from Connecticut, I do have support here, such as the healthy relationships that I've been able to establish with men in prison who have now gone home to become productive members of their own communities. In fact, one of my dear friends, Mr. Michael Braun, a man who, after serving over 2 decades in prison, has gone home to become a small business owner, a paralegal, and a law student at the UConn Law School in Hartford. Also, I have the support of the Wesleyan CPE staff and my support of Wesleyan faculty members, helping me identify resources to aid my successful transition. They will open up their office to me so that I can continue receiving education advising, training in digital skills, and support for job searches for my further career-related goals. And finally, but for sure not least, I have the support of my mother. She's been my greatest support during my whole incarceration and honestly, my whole life. And while this is just some of the support networks that I have in Connecticut, my network does expand beyond Connecticut by way of other family and friends. For example, I have an invitation to work with a Mr. Julio Medina, who runs a nonprofit organization in Harlem, New York, called the Exodus Transition Community. This is an organization that helps those coming home from prison successfully reintegrate back into society. So to be sure, I do have support networks in and out of Connecticut. Now, I know that mentioning my mother as a support network draws attention to where we're at today and where I'm at with my father. As for my mother and me, our relationship and our path to healing began with acknowledging the harm we've caused each other. And ultimately, we've committed ourselves to nurturing our respective gifts rather than fulfilling an expectation from one another. Our relationship is an ever-growing one, and what I've learned about my mother is this: she doesn't do things for me to get something from me. No. Everything my mother has ever done for me or has tried to do for me was out of a place of love. And of course, she hasn't always hit the mark, but what parent has? The kind of love she's shown me is the kind of love I'm guided by today. And we're committed to cultivating our relationship. And I'm honored to know that, according to my mother, I'm the man she respects the most on this side of heaven. Her sentiment gives me great faith that she won't treat me like a child because I know she sees me as a man. And so I thank you, Umi. While this is the relationship I'm able to develop with my mother, unfortunately, I can't say the same for my father since he passed away on May 28th, 2022. Nevertheless, my father and I were able to get to a place of reconciliation, where my content for our relationship offered him the much needed peace to be content with his death. Now, please let me be clear. I love and I miss my father, and my holding him accountable does not mean that he does not still hold a place in my heart. I was able to heal because I forgave my father. And my relationship with my father taught me this: that only I can decide if a relationship depletes me or empowers me. So I thank you, Dad. Naturally, I'm thankful to all the support that I've received over the years. After all, when I legally changed my name in 2009, I chose the name Shakur in part because it means thankful. So to all of those who've ever supported me, I'm thankful to and for you, because you finding meaning in my life helped me find meaning in the life of others, as well as my own. And so I only hope that I can be for you and others what you all are continuously for me. Now, as I have the opportunity to thank those who have been here for me, it's not lost on me that Mr. Bugby and his family won't be able to do the same for each other. So as I conclude my address, I'd like to once again take this opportunity to extend a genuine apology to Mr. Bugby and his family. I'm sorry. And I'll always be sorry. And I don't say sorry to make myself feel better. But I say sorry because it's the responsible thing to do, because I hold on to the hope that as you go on your path to healing, it'll help you as well. So I'm truly sorry. As for the members of this board, I recognize the task ahead of you. I'd like to say that I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to me. It's my hope that as you consider my release from prison today, that you're further inspired by the following 3 things. 1, during my graduation, we had the honor of having President Joe Biden's Secretary of Education deliver the commencement speech, Secretary Miguel Cardona. In his speech, he emphasized 2 points: choices and chances. Well, I hope the choices that I've made during my incarceration show that I'm ready to be, I'm ready for a second chance to be part of society again. And 2, I hope that you all believe unequivocally as I do, that my potential is not limited to these prison walls, but rather my potential extends beyond them, and that the skies are my limit. And finally, it's a request that I learned in my Japanese class. Kyou wa yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Arigatou gozaimasu. Which translates, as for today, I humbly ask that you all look upon me favorably. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Collins, for your statement. Clear, you put a lot of effort into that because you provided us with a lot of information. How long have you been working on that statement?
It took me about 2 weeks to write it, and then about another week and a half to edit it. You know, I really couldn't focus on it as much because I'm in the middle of a semester right now. So.
Okay. Well, Mr. Collins, we appreciate that. In addition to your statement, we have reviewed, this panel has reviewed extensively your case file, which includes court documents, the police reports, the pre-sentence investigation transcript, as well as your accomplishments throughout your time with the Department of Correction, your educational transcripts, letters of recommendation, evaluations from the programs you've taken, of course, disciplinary reports too from early on. In addition, we reviewed the packet that was submitted by Attorney Carlson and the report from social worker Isaacs. So we have thoroughly reviewed your case. We do have some additional questions. When we're done with our questioning, we'll turn the hearing over to the Office of Victim Services for input from the victim's family. And then Attorney Carlson and Attorney McMahon from the State's Attorney's Office will have the opportunity to speak. We will render our decision here today. Okay, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
We'll begin with my colleague, Mr. Pohl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Collins.
Good morning.
Couple of things. One is congratulations on that associate's degree. I know the last time that we saw each other during the commutation hearing, you were still working on that. And
Thank you.
I'm really, your education plan is incredible. And I don't know, eventually where you want to go into social work. but your insight into not only yourself, but the people around you, is incredible. You know, actually thinking deeply about how your actions have affected others and things that they might be contemplating. You know, just it goes to show you've really considered what you've done, you know, and the effect that that's had on people, you know, people that loved the victim in this case very much. You know, as you laid out everything for us, you know, we're usually in a place where we try to dig for some additional information, some additional answers to questions that we might have. But you certainly covered like everything. And not only everything, but with your release plan, just like even how each action will produce or goal or action will produce certain things. You've thought it through, you know. That's not what happened, you know, that's not what happened back on May 19th, 2003. You weren't thinking at all. You know, and that's, it shows the maturation, you know, and it shows what you've tried to do. I'm really at a loss for questions because of how well you've covered absolutely everything. You know, I know that you've done well. You know, there's nine DRs, only 2 of them since you've been sentenced. And those are nonviolent DRs from going on 20 years ago. You've addressed so many things. I really, you know, I'm really hopeful that DV is something that you use that social work for. Too often, too many men don't get it. And what you said about being an ally that understands, but then even went further into sharing how you understood and using your own personal experiences to know not only what the problem is, but what to do about it. You know, how many people out there lose their lives in a DV related incident, right? And for you to be able to head off in that direction, and I'm not sure, but is that what is the where are you headed with? Where you headed with masters in social work?
So yeah, I'd like to get into the field of some type of therapy, but before getting that deep into it, what I really would like to do is just be able to work with like a lot of nonprofit organizations, particularly around domestic violence. In fact, I'm in conversation with one of the teachers here who she teaches cosmetology, and I was watching a public television program and I was informed about how in different states, they're coming up with legislation to give tax breaks and such to people who own salons so that their employees can get trained in domestic violence, because oftentimes women are coming through these spaces, and so being able to give them a resource where it doesn't make them feel ashamed, because salons and barbershops, these are places of ease and to get away from it. So me and the teacher are working with ideas to, in the event that I do go home, come up with ideas for legislation that we can offer to our local legislators about trying to get something done, but not just on the outside. Also, I've been talking with the commissioner of the Department of Corrections, as well as some of the deputy wardens here, about trying to get a mass implementation of domestic violence on people who, even if it's not on their OAP, because the reality is this, that even if you have never been arrested for domestic violence, 3 out of every 5 people have experienced it. And then oftentimes 3 out of those same 5 will go on to perpetuate it. And so I can imagine there's some instance within the prison system that somebody has experienced domestic violence, and I know how pivotal it can be. And so between that and then like mass incarceration, having been in here for the last 21 and a half years, and then not just being in here, but also I've been arrested since I was 12 and been coming in and out of juvenile detention since I was 13. So it's not just about being able to offer services for people who are on the other side of domestic violence, but really trying to offer it to those before they even get there.
And that's the piece that I was really talking about. A man being able to talk to other men about what's going on. And that's not saying that women don't perpetuate domestic violence at times, against men, but it's often men that just don't get it.
And I'd like to be clear, because what I don't want to do is like get into a superhero syndrome, like I'm coming to save the day, right? My hope is that I'm only there to affirm the power that victims of domestic violence have within their own selves. Because I know for a long time, my mother didn't feel empowered. As a child, I didn't feel empowered. So we didn't know how to reconcile with that situation. And so I'm not coming in to be nobody's superhero. I'm coming in to be an ally, as I said.
I definitely don't hear a superhero. I hear one person who understands a great deal and has the ability to do something with it. Oftentimes we talk about during hearings like this or commutations, a life is gone. But when people who committed offenses like that can dedicate themselves to things that can help other people not be victims like you caused, right? That says a lot, right? And certainly you've done some really positive things, mentorship, mentorship and AVP, and other things like that. It's really important. The understanding that somebody who's young, and their actions, actually can result because of what they're not getting. I heard you. I heard you, when your mother was going through what she was going through with your dad. And you were trying to bring yourself up. And you reached out for influences like too many young people actually look to the wrong influences. And it takes a while for it to get sorted out in their heads, if it ever does. I'm glad it's been sorted out here. You know, I just, tragedy that's happened here. And I really think that you have the ability to positively affect the community. And I'm really sure of that. And there's not much that we can be absolutely sure about in hearings like this. I appreciate all of the work that you've done and all of the insight that you've had and all of the really active remorse that you've displayed. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Collins, I do really need to point out this was a horrific and senseless crime. Reading the police report and the other documents with the details was a difficult thing. And I'm sure it haunts your victims' family members on a daily basis. Can't take that away from them, unfortunately. You have acknowledged responsibility and taken full accountability for your actions for many years now. And I appreciate, and I hope any of the victims' family members who are listening can get something from hearing the remorse that you've expressed to them, because that is something that you should live with and also experience for the rest of your life. I'm happy to see all of the things that you've done. You had nothing but positive reports from the Department of Correction for all of the many things that you've accomplished. A Wesleyan education is no easy feat. We all know that. I hope you can appreciate what that means, the value of that education, and that you will continue to use that education and all of your training and education to give back to the community, because you did take a lot from the community, and you owe that to everybody. I did see that you were a certified healthcare aide. Did you have the opportunity to utilize those skills?
Very much informally. So there was on one occasion where I had a cellmate who was going into heart palpitations and like difficulties, and at the time the officer didn't know what to do until the response team came to help him. But in the interim, I was able to help my cell, the person that I was living in the cell with, get some form of relief until medical showed up. So that's the only time really informally I've ever had to use it. But as soon as I got my degree from Stratford Career Institute, I moved here to Cheshire so that I can get into the Wesleyan program. So, and the hope was that the plan was if I didn't get into Wesleyan, that I would go into McDougall CI so that I can actually exercise my training in the CNA program up there.
Okay.
But fortunately, I was able to get into the Wesleyan program.
Yeah. We read that you were a mentor in the True Unit for 6 months. Now, we hear a lot about the True Unit and all that it has to offer young inmates. Tell us about your experience there and why you chose to leave.
So, first, it was an experience that you can only, as a person who hasn't been up there, you idealize that experience. And what I mean by that is you hope that there's a space where you can get to, and a place that you can get to where when you're dealing with staff, as a person trying to deal with taking responsibility, remorse, and your own traumas, that the relationships are not antagonistic. And so as I was able to share that space with other officers, to see that my experience wasn't exclusively my own, because even before I was in that program, my relationship with staff was always healthy. And I think that's in part was one of the reasons why I've been able to like concentrate a lot of my energy on being remorseful and doing all of the positive things, because I wasn't so distracted by feeling like, well, that's the police, or I have to have an antagonistic relationship with them. So being up in that space and seeing that, no, that actually is, that debunks the narrative that within the Department of Corrections, there has, just because I'm an incarcerated person and just because this is a corrections officer, that the relationship has to be antagonistic. So that's what I appreciated while I was up there. That being said, what I also know is this, that the more you take people who are deemed qualified to be in spaces like that out of like forgotten spaces, the more those forgotten spaces will continue to perpetuate all types of different violences upon itself. And so it was important for me to be able to be in spaces where guys who don't get a chance to go up to the true unit and see that a relationship with an officer doesn't have to be antagonistic. They can see that relationship even in those dark spaces. And please let me be clear, I'm not trying to elevate myself as some type of important person. But what I do know is that when you take responsibility for your own life, the impact that that has on somebody else being able to see that is important. And I know that from my own personal experience, because, you know, I only listed a few people who have been here for me. But my successes have never been mutually exclusive to myself. They've been at they've come at the hands of counselors, other incarcerated men. I can go on really. And so it was important for me to, as it were, do the grassroots level work as well.
Thank you. In what year did you change your name, and what was the catalyst for doing so?
So I changed my name legally in 2009. However, I had adopted the name probably about 2 years before that. In 2006, I had converted to Islam, and one of my mentors, he's passed away now due to COVID, Mr. Mustafa Austin. He just started calling me Shakur, and I was like, why are you calling me that for? He's like, because every time I do something for you, you're saying thank you. Or every time I see, even when I see you talking to the officer, oh, can you pop us this cell? Thank you. And so it just kind of, yeah, I took it on like, you know, as I guess it was something that he seen in me that was a personification. And so really, I really tried to live up to that name by just being thankful. And what I mean by thankful, by being present in every moment. And although it's been a journey, it's one that I've been very much intentional about. And so that had a lot to do with it, as well as because I'm Muslim and it's an Arabic name, it just made sense.
Okay. What are you doing right now in the prison?
Right now, like I'm literally in the middle semester. Actually, I got an exam this afternoon after this hearing, so my final exams. Yeah.
What classes are you taking?
This semester I'm taking Japanese advanced, decolonizing education, the history of religious leaders, and macroeconomics.
Okay. Yeah, that's a full course load for sure. All right, thank you for speaking with me. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Chance.
Yes, so Mr. Collins, I would like to go back to March 26, 2006, when you said you found out you were going to be an uncle again. And that triggered something that caused you to want to really work on yourself and be a better person. So you said you focused on that, religion, and therapy. How did you come up with those three things?
So like I said, so with my niece, it was like she was the catalyst, and I think really it had a lot to do with my younger brother, because my younger brother, like we were best friends. We are best friends, right? And like I said, I had nieces and nephews. I had a niece and a nephew before, but when he told me that he was going to be an uncle, like the thought came to me that in the event anything ever happened to him, I need to be able to show up for that little girl in the best way that I could, even if it meant being behind prison, right? And so like And it wasn't difficult. It was difficult. Trust me, it was arduous because while I have this ideal in my mind, I still have these other notions of I have to be a prisoner as opposed to be a person who happens to be in prison, right? I had to debunk that, and so she was the catalyst, and so it was a topsy-turvy situation. But also, what helped me, like what brought relief to that situation, again, was the people who were actively choosing to invest in me. And I had to ask myself, why people care about me? Why are people still showing up for me when I don't show up for myself? And I had to have a real, and you know, one thing prison does, it makes you do one of two things: sit with yourself and have to reconcile that, or bury yourself deep in your trauma and then continue to perpetuate all type of violence on other people. And I chose the former, the latter. And so that's where the therapy came into place, where now I have the birth of my niece, and I have clinicians and unit managers who are investing in me. Like, I literally had one of my unit managers tell me, I'm not letting you leave this space until you get your GED. Right?
That was very interesting because you got your GED that same year in November.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you another question. So you talked about at the commutation hearing that when you thought you were going to go out right away, that you experienced two things, or you thought about two things: your frustration and freedom. And you decided to choose freedom. Was that before you got the results of the commutation, or knowing that you still had some more work to do?
I would say both, because I feel like before I went into that commutation, I should caveat it with this, or preface it with this. Freedom to me, what I learned, is a state of mind, right? I'm incarcerated, but doesn't mean I don't have to be free. And so before I went into that commutation hearing, I felt like I was free because I was exercising at that time who I was and who I was dedicated to becoming in the most healthiest ways. To me, that's freedom, right? Now, if I'm being honest, sure, I was frustrated because I don't want to undermine. I don't want my successes to undermine the reality that prison is also a traumatic experience, right? And I don't want to wash over that. And so when you can get away from that trauma, when you have to come to a realization that, okay, these are some things that I'm gonna have to continue to experience, it's like, okay, but as the proverbial statement goes, the show doesn't stop; it must go on, right? And so for me, it was like, okay, I was never entitled to that anyways. Just like I'm not entitled to this, I don't feel entitled. But one thing I know is that I work hard, and I'm very intentional about that, and I can rest my laurels on that. I can't control anything else. And really, my frustration was predominantly around the fact that, you know, my mother just had a heart attack, and a person who is qualified to take care of somebody like that, I can't do that. And it was frustrating for sure, but it wasn't the thing that I focused on. I pivoted and said, okay, it's time to just keep doing the work.
That must have been a very tough decision for you to make, and to accept that you were trained to go and take care of your mother, because I read that whole piece about what you were feeling, and the fact that you can't, or you couldn't, but you thought about the bigger picture, which I thought was pretty relevant. And I think what I like about what you're saying is, from that date on, I looked at all the notes that I took. Everything just sort of fell into place for you. But I think what was pretty important for me, Dave, listening to your statement for 32 minutes which I thought was, pretty spellbound, was your commitment to advocate for women and children of domestic violence. And it spoke to your experience when you were younger and growing up, and what you're aware of what's going on in today's society. So, I know that you are well equipped to go out and give back, and I certainly hope, if the victims are listening, that they hear the remorse that you have expressed and the fact that you're still here, but that when you go into the community, you want to give back what you took from the community, and you want to go beyond that.
Certainly.
So thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. At this time, we'll turn the hearing over to the Office of Victim Services for input. Ms. Vasquez, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was having some technical difficulties. I have a couple of statements that the victim's family have asked me to read on their behalf. For 21 years, my husband and I have gone to the cemetery almost every day. I told my son that it's too bad that someone had ended your life the way it did. I asked God to bless Kenny and take care of him. We miss him all the time. He was a real good person. He was well liked. He was well liked. Terry is going home to his family. My son isn't coming home. I hope you realize that what Terry has done. I hope he's changed for the better. If not, God help him. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. James Bugley. The next statement reads, he killed my brother when he was 44 years old. When Terry Collins is done with his sentence, he will be 44 years old. The irony in that is beyond my understanding and leaves us with a heavy heartache. Terry Collins should not have rights to appeal or apply for anything. He should stay incarcerated until he serves all of his time. On behalf of my dead brother, Kenneth Bugbee, and his children and family, I ask that you decide to keep Terry Collins, who premeditated the murder of my brother and their father, then lied to the court for almost 2 years until he was found out and accepted a plea deal, incarcerated for as long as possible, as we feel he is a danger to our family and society as a whole. Thank you for your consideration. Madam Chair and board members, these are all the things that I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, we'll afford the attorney an opportunity to make a statement. We will begin with State's Attorney McMahon. If you have any comments or statements you would like to make, you may do so now.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Zaccagnini, Ms. Chance, Mr. Pohl. I want to thank the board for allowing me a chance to speak on behalf of State's Attorney Mahoney and for accommodating me remotely this morning. We've heard a lot about Mr. Collins already this morning. I just want to take an opportunity to highlight Mr. Kenneth Bugbee for you all. At the time of his murder, Mr. Bugbee was 44 years old, as you just heard from his sister's statement. He was married with 2 children, and he struggled in many of the ways that Mr. Collins shared that he has struggled. Kenneth was not a perfect man. No one is, but he was loved, and he is still very loved by his family and those that knew him. His life had value, and his life was taken from him brutally by Mr. Collins on May 19th, 2003. On that day, Mr. Collins drove Kenneth in Kenneth's car to Fisher Elementary School in Thompson. And while there, Mr. Collins unsheathed a 14-inch blade that he regularly kept on his person. He referred to it as his sword. He then proceeded to stab Kenneth 7 times, twice in the front of his body, in his stomach and chest, and then 5 times in his back. Mr. Collins then went back into Kenneth's car and sat for 5 minutes in the parking lot while Kenneth lay dying. 5 minutes. After those 5 minutes, Mr. Collins exited the car, went back to where Mr. Bugbee lay, and proceeded to drag him across the parking lot of that elementary school. Along the way, Mr. Collins had to stop 3 times, struggling with the weight of Mr. Bugbee. But he persisted, and he managed to drag Mr. Bugbee all the way across the parking lot to the tree line adjacent to some baseball fields near that elementary school. And then Mr. Collins dumped Kenneth there, where he died in pain, alone, and in the dark. Mr. Collins then left, got back into Kenneth's car, drove to his mother's house, where he picked up a fresh set of clothes. He went back to a party that was going on and met up with his girlfriend, asked his girlfriend to wash the clothes he was wearing when he murdered Kenneth. And then that next morning, Mr. Collins gathered up the laundered bloody clothes, his 14-inch sword, and its sheath, and brought them to the river. And he threw those items in the river and then waited and watched as the evidence of his crime drifted away in the water. All the while, Kenneth Bugbee remained abandoned in the woods line of that elementary school. He wasn't discovered until the next day, at the end of the school day, because school was in session that day. He was discovered by a teacher, and the teacher immediately summoned the help of a baseball coach who was in one of those nearby baseball fields practicing with the varsity baseball team. And finally, Mr. Bugbee received some help that he needed. Later, Mr. Collins was interviewed by police, and he lied elaborately about where he was and what he did that night. It was only after hours that Mr. Collins eventually told the truth, and we found out, at least in part, what happened that night, though we will never really understand why. And we're here today because of those actions, because of Kenneth Bugbee's murder. And Mr. Collins pled guilty to that murder in 2005. He reached an agreement with the state and convinced the court that 29 years was the appropriate sentence for him. His age at the time was a significant factor in determining the appropriateness of that sentence for these actions. At his sentencing on June 24th, 2004, attorney Tom DeLillo for the state told the court that this was, quote, a true plea agreement. There's no right to argue, no sentence review right. Judge Danahy then went on to tell the Bugbee family that this part of their grieving process, referring to the criminal prosecution part, the criminal aspect, that chapter was closed for them. And they could now hopefully put that behind them and move on and deal with their grief in other ways. Well, they haven't gotten the benefit of that deal that was agreed to back in 2005. Instead, in 2022, Mr. Collins' sentence was commuted and reduced to the statutory mandatory minimum of 25 years. That is the lowest that our law permits an individual who is convicted of murder to serve. He's got that now. That's his sentence. And at that hearing, the board heard much of what's been shared today regarding his lack of disciplinary history, his program successes while incarcerated. He thereafter filed a sentence modification request that was denied because the court has no authority to reduce it lower than the statutory mandatory minimum, which he now has. But yet he's here now, again, asking for a further reduction of the time that he agreed to serve, that the family accepted he would serve. I spoke with Mr. Bugby's sister yesterday, and she pointed out to me what she shared with this board, that if Mr. Collins receives the full 25-year sentence, he will be released at approximately age 44. And that has a type of poetic justice to it, that he would get to begin his life again at the age Kenneth was when his life was so brutally taken from him. And then hopefully, of course, Mr. Collins will be able to live at least 44 more years to give him that chance to engage in the plan that he's presented to the board today, engage in all of the positive ways he plans to change his community, contribute to his community, all while he reintegrates back into society. And genuinely, on behalf of the state, we hope he succeeds in all of those plans, because his life too has value. But we're asking that wait for the appropriate time, after he's paid that debt to society for his actions, because this murder was brutal. Judge Danahy at sentencing acknowledged the lack of humanity demonstrated by Mr. Collins' actions that day. At this proceeding, the board is tasked with considering Mr. Collins' youth at the time of the offense, with the idea that adolescents, even later age adolescents, are still in the process of developing their brain. And as a result of that ongoing development, their actions can be characterized by impulsivity and an absence of deep thought about the consequences of their own actions. But these proceedings are not held in order to rubber stamp early release. The board is tasked with considering the serious nature of the charges and the needs of society together with the portrait of the offender, both at the time that they committed the offense and who they are today, having taken advantage of the many opportunities they're afforded while incarcerated. And there's no doubt that Mr. Collins has engaged in those opportunities, and the state certainly credits that. But Mr. Collins' actions the night that he murdered Mr. Bugby do not reflect that characteristic impulsivity and thoughtlessness of adolescence. Instead, Mr. Collins took time to think on May 19th, 2003. He thought about how to cover up his actions, underscoring just how seriously he understood the consequences of those actions would be. Mr. Collins, in his statement today to the board, characterized his actions as rash, but that's simply not supported by the facts of the case. Mr. Pohl, you also made a comment that Mr. Collins wasn't thinking at all on May 19th, 2003. But again, the facts show that he was thinking, and that he intentionally took time to think about his actions and how to avoid the consequences for them. He was thinking about himself. That he's matured over time isn't in dispute, but these hearings cannot simply focus on how he's developed over the course of time. That's to be expected. But this board is also obligated to balance and consider the needs of society and the purposes of sentences for the intentional, thoughtful, cold, and calculated actions that are at issue in this particular case. The state is, as a result, asking this board deny Mr. Collins' petition for early release, hold Mr. Collins to the bargain that he agreed to and his current release date, which is just about 3.5 more years away, to continue to protect society, to honor the victims in this matter, Mr. Bugby and his family and his loved ones, and to finally give them what everyone hoped that they would get when the sentence was initially handed down, and that's a chance to finally close this chapter. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney McMahon. At this time, Attorney Carlson, if you have any remarks or statements you'd like to make, you may do so now.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank the board members for the opportunity to speak with you all this morning. I would also like to thank Shakur for allowing me to be part of his team. It has been an absolute honor and a privilege to be part of this team. And I say part of his team because that's really what we've been. Myself, Carrie Ann, our social worker, and Jen, our paralegal, have been Shakur's support team. When I first met Shakur earlier this year, it was evident that he had already done the work to prepare for release into the community. He didn't need us to tell him what he needed to do or what he needed to say. He is already, and has been for many years, a true example of someone who has been preparing every single day for life outside of prison walls. It also quickly became clear to me that he was not doing this work for the purpose of getting released. He was doing it because he is constantly striving to be a better person for not only himself, but for others. Every single time I've spoken with Shakur, he begins by asking how I am, how my day or how my week has been, and he genuinely cares about the answer. He also always shares a new story about a young man he's trying to connect with and mentor in prison, an interesting challenge in the classroom, or a new goal that he has set for himself. Shakur is genuine, motivated, thoughtful, insightful, intelligent, and caring. In the time that Shakur has been incarcerated, he has accomplished many extraordinary things. I won't recount them here because I think he's done a very good job of doing that already himself this morning, but I do want to emphasize how much he has accomplished during his time in prison. Shakur has held many different jobs and he's received excellent work reviews from his supervisors at work. As he spoke about already this morning, for a short time, he was a mentor in the TRUE program. And during one of our visits, we were talking about his time in the TRUE program and why he wanted to leave. And similar to as he discussed already this morning, he told us that although he enjoyed being a TRUE mentor, he felt that he could have an even greater impact by staying on his regular unit and mentoring young men who were not in the TRUE program, but could benefit from mentoring nonetheless. I think this is really a perfect example of who Shakur is at his core. Someone who is constantly trying to better himself so that he can help others. These experiences, his work ethic, and the dedication that he has displayed while incarcerated has prepared him for employment at his family business upon his release and any other employment opportunities that he chooses to seek out. In addition to his many other responsibilities, Shakur has truly excelled in the classroom. He completed his associate's degree and is very close to completing his bachelor's degree. The evaluations from his professors perfectly describe the man that I have come to know. Things like his work ethic is unmatched, he's engaging, and he consistently brings a high level of intellectual rigor to discussions. As Shakur discussed, he does plan to continue his education upon his release, going on to complete his bachelor's degree and eventually enroll in a master's program to get a degree in social work. If released, I know he will be an asset to any classroom, and he will bring his varied experiences and insights to those discussions. If he does ultimately decide to continue on and get his master's degree in social work, I already know that he will have a huge positive impact on those that he treats or those that he helps, because in the short time that I've known him, he's already caused me to think about things differently. I respectfully ask the board to grant Shakur's application for parole today. The added support of parole will only further strengthen Shakur's ability to be successful upon his return to the community. I believe that Shakur not only meets, but really does exceed the statutory criteria set forth in section 54-125A. Shakur has grown tremendously from the young man that he was at 18 years old when he entered prison. He has accepted full responsibility for this horrific crime. He has also displayed genuine, sincere remorse. As Shakur stated already himself this morning, his record in prison reflects that he has been an exemplary incarcerated person. And through my conversations with him, I know that he's ready to be an exemplary person outside of these prison walls. He has the tools, motivation, and the support to make an incredibly positive impact on the world outside of prison. And I have no doubt that he will wake up every single day with the goal of bettering himself and his community. And most importantly, I do believe that he has a huge positive impact and he has so much value that he can bring to the community that he is ready for release. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. So at this point, Mr. Collins, the panel will enter into deliberation. It's an open deliberation, so everyone will hear. We'll discuss your case and we'll come back with our decision. Okay, Mr. Cole, let's start with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly heard the victim's case. The sister representing the family, and then also the mother and father of the victim. And certainly that damage that's there, that loss that's there is something that Mr. Collins spoke deeply about during the entire hearing. 23-169 asked me to think about thoughts, impulsivity, and things like that. And although I heard the supervisory state's attorney, the thinking that went into this happened after the act. Going into what happened to Mr. Collins shows the impulsivity, shows the, just the types of things that 23-169 talks about. And certainly, going into this, what, disciplinary reports that happened with Mr. Collins prior to sentencing, and then the two after, which were nonviolent in nature, got to a place where he actually considered at an age where he really could consider his actions on other people and exactly what he was doing and exactly what kind of person he wants to be. From that point, he engaged in a lot of just an incredible amount of positive things. He became a leader, mentor in the right way. He went very much inside. And it's incredibly obvious how inside himself Mr. Collins went to really understand, his own childhood and upbringing, the effects that trauma there had on him, rethinking how he relates to the rest of the world and how he relates to himself. That was very obvious, what happened here. One of the things that's huge in recidivism, reduction in recidivism, is education. And not only went and took care of high school type education, but then entered with the help of Middlesex Community College and Wesleyan, the associate's degree program, which he graduated cum laude. That in itself, how he applies and has applied himself to so many things. Working towards a bachelor's in African American studies, and then with currently sites at a master's in social work. There's many different things that you could do with that. And the impact, the current trajectory of his life and thinking, the impact that in itself could have on so many other people in a positive way is just incredibly important. If one of the things, certainly having served on the commutation panel as well, the sentence came from 29 to 25 years, but even if we look at the commutation in itself, and if that didn't occur, he would have been eligible for a 23-169 hearing when he was 17.4 years into a sentence. And he's well past that time now. Obviously 23-169 wasn't there at that time, his release plan with his mother and support in a family business and an occupation that he can earn some money with the Lifespan company while he continues to go to work is a solid plan in itself. Understanding that as well, he would look to engage with CCAR in New Haven and another organization which deals with a nonprofit that deals with reentry, wants to engage in therapy, and very much understands about using a parole officer for resources, and the relationship that he has with DOC staff now, I'm certain that that relationship, he would do well with that. I don't think Mr. Collins will ever forget Mr. Buckley. That tragic, heinous act, it happened when he was 18 years old. But when it comes to suitability for under 23-169, which the legislature has asked us to look at last year with the passing of this law, I believe he's suitable. And I also believe that he would be very successful if he were paroled today.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief because you did a nice job of covering it all, and I think we have discussed it in our hearing as well. I do want to again thank the victim's family for their input. We always do take that into consideration and value the words and the difficult task of having to relive this horrible crime over and over again with every hearing. The legislature did pass Public Act 23-169 in recognition that there is a diminished culpability for younger offenders, in this case, under the age of 21. I think it's pretty clear from reviewing the file and listening to Mr. Collins today that there is a reasonable probability that he can remain at liberty without violating the law. Certainly, I think at this point, the benefit to society having him in the community is greater than the benefit to his continued incarceration. And he has demonstrated substantial rehabilitation throughout the past 21 plus years. So for those reasons, I would be in favor of granting parole today. Ms. Chance?
I absolutely agree with what both of you have said, and I have nothing more to add because my thoughts were right where Mr. Bowles was.
Okay, thank you. Conditions, we have family members. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 that were registered, and alcohol consumption certainly played a role.
Yeah.
Although he has been sober for all these years, we know that temptations may arise in the community. Is there anything further?
No, I think it's appropriate because he did reach out to CCAR. So.
I had a mental health eval, but I really think he understands what he needs to do.
Yeah, I think that would be part of his. Yeah,
that he needs to get.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. In the matter of Terry Collins, inmate number 302661, I'll make a motion to grant parole effective November 22nd, 2024, with the following additional conditions: no consumption of alcoholic beverages, no contact with the victim's family members, initials RB, TB, BB, or JB. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Mr. Collins, you understand, while we gave a date of today, it's effective today, but it may take some time, okay? So just be patient. Someone will reach out to you. We thank everyone for their participation here today.
Thank you.
Public 169 hearing for Terry Collins, inmate number 302661 and
Okay, so I don't have any information on this case, and for me, that what makes this all the more frustrating. It's like we sat here for an hour and a half, and unless I missed it, I still have no idea why he murdered him. How is that not a question that the parole board asks? It starts off with his long statement, his long letter, like a half hour long. And again, it doesn't give any insight. It doesn't, for me, make me understand why at 18 you stab to death your 44-year-old friend twice in the stomach and what, 3 times or 4 or 5 in the back, that you then dragged him out into the woods while he died. And the first thing Mike Pollan got, I think, if many of you know how much I despise Mike Poll, many of you do as well. He's got rose-colored glasses on. He starts off the hearing by saying, "I have no questions because you said it all." And it's like, if we didn't have other states to look at, if we didn't, we cover so many, if we didn't see thousands of parole hearings, or we can see how parole board members would say, okay, take us back to the crime. Tell us why. Why? No, instead it's, wow, I have no questions to ask. And then again, it's like further insult to injury to summarize how he starts the summary. He says, well, had the law for 23169 been passed, he would have been eligible 18 years into his sentence. So, I was like, how is that relevant? The law was it wasn't passed. His crime, it was rash, which falls under 23169, where you're not fully developed, under the age of 21. He was only 18. But it was the cover up. Yeah, the where he thought things out, as the DA pointed out. That was after the act. It still is crazy to me that Connecticut says under the age of 21, you're looked at as a child, which it's so hypocritical. How do you get drafted into the army? How do you get treated? But under the age of, and they're going to try. They're already trying to make it under the age of 25, 26. Where scientifically your brain stops developing, right? And we'll see that age is going to go up and up and up and up and up, and people are going to be having these hearings. It's absurd. I think it's absurd. What I cannot get over is how we still do not have insight. Why? Tell us why. It really takes a certain kind of person. And again, they're talking as if they believe they're drunk on the Kool-Aid. It's like they truly believe he is a child, an 18-year-old man, to take out a sword, as he called it, and to do that 2, 3, 4, 5, and then to be callous enough to go to a party after where your girlfriend's waiting for you, and to party, and then to hide the evidence, and then to drag the body out into an elementary park or school behind where it's found. And it's like, This is not a normal. You can't just say, "Oh, he was under the age of 21." It happens to all of us. I thought the state's attorney did a fantastic job. I want to give her a shout out. We see state's attorneys that so often show up, and you don't really feel like their heart's in it. You feel like they're just checking the boxes. They get their assistant, the paralegal gives them this file, and they go and they read something. I thought it was good. I thought she has some just great points in there, laid it out, said what needed to be said. She spoke to the victims, the irony that he'll be the same age when he gets out. And the whole thing about this is, and I thought he said, I thought he said a lot. I felt like he had tears. That you don't really know if he was acting or not. He certainly, when the DA was speaking, showed no emotion. It was just staring her down like a rival. But the amount of times that he worked to get, so he had his sentence was commuted from 29 years to 25 years. We didn't cover that. That was before we could cover hearings. That wasn't enough for him. He then filed for another reduction, which they denied. And then he got his third bite at the apple, which was the 23,169, after his commutation, which he now is granted. So he gets released early. Now, had he completed his sentence after his reduction, he already got commuted from 29 years to 25 years. So his full term date would have been 2032. It was released to 2028. And he gets granted. He gets granted in 11/22/2024, which is when this hearing was granted. If he were to just complete his sentence, he would have gone out 2028. So they were arguing over 4 years. One can easily say, if you're truly remorseful, why don't you do the 4 years more? And why are you re-victimizing the victims? Now, if you want to have the counter argument, and that's the thing about these hearings, we get to hear from both sides. We get to hear from the prosecutor, we get to hear from the defense attorney, we get to hear from the perp himself. And he has done well in prison. He has, I guess, while there are many that we see where they haven't, where they've done awful, where they are just really a waste of air, a waste of oxygen. And you want to make the argument, if you do so well, that you should be rewarded. It is just kind of interesting when you're saying how sorry you are and how you hope. He said a few things right. What did he say about the forgiveness? I hope that they can forgive me, but not for me, for them, or not. It was something I can't remember the exact words, but it I thought it landed well. It wasn't like demanding forgiveness. It wasn't those words. I can't remember, but I thought it landed well. Anyways, but at the same time, it's kind of like well, you only care so much, right? Because you are putting them through it again. They had to show up to the commutation hearing. Then they were going to get notified that and it's like, you keep putting them through the ringer when you could just serve your time. So I'll never get over that. And that's what ends up happening. An 18-year-old man does this, gets a 29-year plea deal, gets it reduced to 25 years, and then ultimately gets out after serving what? 24 years? 3 years? I'm not good at math. What are your thoughts? You let me know in the comments section. And with that, I'll let you go.
I spoke with Mr. Bugby's sister yesterday, and she pointed out to me what she shared with this board, that if Mr. Collins receives the full 25-year sentence, he will be released at approximately age 44. And that has a type of poetic justice to it, that he would get to begin his life again at the age Kenneth was when his life was so brutally taken from him. And then hopefully, of course, Mr. Collins will be able to live at least 44 more years to give him that chance to engage in the plan that he's presented to the board today, engage in all of the positive ways he plans to change his community, contribute to his community, all while he reintegrates back into society. And genuinely, on behalf of the state, we hope he succeeds in all of those plans, because his life too has value. But we're asking that wait for the appropriate time.